She vanished just steps from home in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America. On the night of October 30th, 1975, 15-year-old Martha Moxley, her blonde hair glowing like moonlight, left her house to go out with friends for Halloween in Belle Haven, Connecticut. She never came back. The next morning, Martha's body was discovered beneath a tree in her own backyard. Her clothes had been pulled down, and her head had been brutally struck with a golf club. But the strangest part wasn't the weapon. It was where it came from. The golf club didn't belong to her. It wasn't from the Moxley household. It was traced to a neighbor, the Skakel family, relatives of the Kennedys. And for nearly 3 decades, every lead pulled the case deeper into a maze of power, wealth, and silence. Until the day Martha's mother, Dorthy Moxley, stood in court and said, "I'm not asking for revenge. I just want the truth for my daughter." Belle Haven, Connecticut, where Martha Moxley and her family had moved just a year before her murder, was the picture-perfect American neighborhood of the 1970s. Tree-lined streets, stately old homes with white picket fences, long driveways like something out of a movie. This wasn't just a place to live. It was a statement of status. A closed world where unspoken rules of power, prestige, and Belle Haven bloodlines quietly operated alongside the law. The Moxleys had come from California. They weren't part of the old money elite. David Moxley worked in insurance, while Dorothy was a soft-spoken but strong-willed homemaker. They didn't have the wealth of the Skakels or other high-profile families nearby. But Martha didn't seem to care. She fit in quickly, won people over easily with her bright smile and natural charm. She played tennis, took art classes, loved to sketch in her notebook, and dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. In her private journal, a small leather-bound diary police would later find in her room, one line stood out, written in bold purple ink. "Belle Haven is beautiful, but it's a strange kind of beautiful. Like everyone's acting in a play I don't understand." Martha wasn't your typical good girl. She had opinions, curiosity, and once wrote an essay about gender inequality at school. But she was still just 15, awkward at times, easily hurt, trusting. On cool autumn evenings, she'd walk the neighborhood with friends, chatting about upcoming tests or crushes at school. It was a small world, and to her, it felt safe. Like many teens in Belle Haven, Martha started hanging out with the Skakel boys, the rich, rebellious neighbors everyone seemed curious about. 2 stood out, 17-year-old Thomas, charming and always smiling, and 15-year-old Michael, quiet, with eyes that always seemed to be hiding something. Both had shown interest in Martha. In another diary entry, she wrote, "Michael kept staring at me the whole party. It was the kind of stare that makes you uncomfortable. But Tom was sweet. He kissed me last night. Not sure how I feel about it." On the surface, Belle Haven looked flawless. But beneath the ivory white paint of its mansions were things no one wanted to talk about. October 30th, 1975, known to teens across America as Mischief Night, the night before Halloween. In many states, it's a time for harmless pranks, shaving cream on cars, toilet paper in trees, ringing doorbells, and running. For the teens of Belle Haven, it was also an excuse to stay out late, especially if there was a party at the Skakel house. That evening, Martha wore a loose white blouse, fitted jeans, and had her hair pulled back. Simple, but striking. She and her friends headed to the Skakels, a large home just a few houses down. Inside, rock music from the 70s, dim yellow lights, and glasses of wine sneakily poured from their father's cellar passed between giggles and whispers. At 9:30 p.m., a neighbor saw Martha sitting outside with Thomas Skakel. The two were talking privately, maybe even flirting. Some later said they kissed, and then she was gone. What's striking is that no one, not friends, dance partners, or even parents, thought anything was seriously wrong that night. Everyone assumed Martha had gone home. After all, she only lived a few houses away. But no one checked, no one called, and by the next day, Martha's radiant smile existed only in photos. 7:30 a.m., October 31st. Dorthy Moxley woke up to find her daughter's bed untouched. She searched the house. No Martha. Her purse was still in her room. Shoes by the door. The phone had no messages. The house was eerily quiet. By 9 o'clock a.m., she stepped into the backyard to look for her daughter and saw something no mother should ever have to see. Martha was lying motionless beneath a tree behind the fence, One of her sneakers had been thrown across the yard, as if ripped off during a struggle. Nearby, something silver glinted in the sun, a broken piece of a golf club stained with blood. Police quickly secured the scene, but when they examined the weapon, the remaining fragments scattered near her body, they found something strange. It was a Tony Penna golf club, a high-end model, and on the grip was a remnant of the personal ID tag of the Skakel family patriarch. What really happened between 9:30 that night and the moment Martha was killed? And why did the murder weapon come from just next door? From the very beginning, the case of Martha Moxley didn't feel like a typical missing persons case. There were no signs she had run away, no goodbye note, no prolonged struggle. Everything seemed to unfold in silence, fast, brutal, and precise. And it was the golf club that shattered Belle Haven's illusion of peace. The club had been broken into pieces, its heavy head used as the main weapon, one fatal blow to the back of her skull, then at least one more through her neck. The lacerations showed a forceful, deliberate, and repeated attack, as if fueled by rage, not panic. But what shocked the community wasn't just how Martha died. It was where the club came from. Initial investigation revealed it was part of a set belonging to Anne Skakel, the mother of the Skakel family next door. The clubs were kept in an unlocked garage. Anyone could have taken them. And this is where things began to get uncomfortable. The last people to see Martha that night, Thomas and Michael Skakel, were Anne's sons. But when police came asking questions, the Skakels didn't cooperate. Lawyers were brought in almost immediately. Neither Thomas nor Michael gave solo interviews without legal counsel. The family refused to provide DNA samples. They wouldn't allow full access to their home. And no one in the household gave a consistent or verifiable account of their whereabouts between 9:30 and 11 p.m., the estimated window when Martha was killed. The police, used to more straightforward missing persons cases, were now up against an invisible wall, a wall built on influence. The Skakels were direct relatives of the Kennedy family, one of the most powerful political dynasties in America. And in a neighborhood like Belle Haven, where your neighbors were bankers, retired judges, and Fortune 500 CEOs, every move the investigators made was watched closely. One officer from that time later recalled, "We weren't just investigating a murder, we were stepping into a world where silence was survival." While the Skakel family closed ranks, across the street, Dorthy Moxley, a mother who had just lost her daughter, went door to door, asking if anyone had seen anything that night. Some answered, others avoided her. A few whispered, "It's better not to dig too deep." But she didn't stop. In any homicide investigation, one of the most crucial elements is the timeline. When the victim was last seen, when the crime occurred, and where everyone else was during that window. But in Martha's case, even time started to feel unreliable. Witnesses, friends, neighbors, and house staff confirmed that Martha was last seen around 9:30 p.m., sitting outside with Thomas Skakel. When questioned, Thomas claimed they just talked for a while, then Martha left and he went inside to read. The problem? No one in the house could confirm seeing Thomas after 9:30. No one vouched for him. Michael Skakel, the 15-year-old younger brother, gave a stranger account. At first, he said he left around 9:15 to practice swinging a golf club and later went looking for the family's housekeeper. But months later, under renewed questioning, he changed his story, saying he had actually climbed a tree near Martha's house around 11 p.m. to look into her bedroom window. Why the change? And what was he doing watching her room? Even more unsettling, Michael claimed he heard laughter from inside Martha's room, but didn't see anyone. No other witnesses heard any sounds in the area at that time. Police grew suspicious, but without physical evidence, there was little they could do. DNA testing wasn't widely available in 1975. Another puzzling detail, Martha's shorts and underwear had been pulled down, but there was no clear evidence of sexual assault. This left police unsure. Was it meant to humiliate or to throw off the investigation? Was the scene staged? And then something else. During the investigation, authorities discovered that the internal security radio recordings from the Belle Haven neighborhood, covering 9:00 to 11:30 p.m., had been completely wiped, deleted. No explanation. No one took responsibility. The system, which recorded internal calls and activity, could have held critical clues. For every clue that surfaced, something else disappeared. For every question asked, a door quietly closed. The entire neighborhood seemed to slip into a strange state, where time lost its meaning and truth dissolved into silence and suspicion. In a world where every path led to a stone wall, Dorthy Moxley was the only one still knocking. Not the police, not the reporters, not the lawyers, just a mother whose daughter was taken at 15 and who had never received an apology, a confession, not even a fragment of the truth. From the day she found Martha's body, Dorthy never left Belle Haven. While the Skakels pulled away from the media, while their lawyers took turns speaking on their behalf, while the neighborhood quietly returned to its curated calm, Dorthy kept walking, kept asking, kept listening. She read case files, wrote to the chief of police, organized petitions for the case to be reopened. Not a single day passed without her thinking of Martha. A close friend once said, "Dorthy doesn't want revenge. She just wants to know who killed her daughter and why." And yet, that simple desire became the hardest thing to get. Years later, the case of Martha Moxley was officially declared a cold case. No arrests, no charges. Conflicting statements lay dormant in dusty case files, like smudged ink on yellowed paper. Even the community began to forget. Belle Haven returned to stillness, as if a girl named Martha had never lived there at all. But Dorthy didn't forget. She started writing to independent journalists, freelance investigators, anyone outside the system she believed had abandoned her child. And because of that persistence, a writer named Dominic Dunn, who had lost his own daughter to violence, heard her story and began his own quest to uncover the truth. Through his writing, Martha's case became more than an unsolved murder. It became a symbol of how injustice thrives behind white picket fences and how those with power can often live untouched by the light of justice. And in every article, every interview, every appearance on TV, Dorthy said just one thing, calmly, without anger, without shouting. She was a good girl. She never got to live, and I can't let the world forget her, just because we didn't have their kind of power. In 1976, just months after Martha's case was officially declared cold, a new name began drawing quiet attention: Kenneth Littleton. Kenneth had moved into the Skakel home as a live-in tutor on the very night Martha was murdered. He was the only adult in the house who wasn't part of the Skakel family. A young teacher newly hired to help supervise the boys, Kenneth had been living there for less than 24 hours when a teenage girl was brutally killed just steps away. During questioning, he appeared nervous, his statements vague, and he revised small details more than once. Officers noted that he was sweating profusely, avoiding eye contact, classic signs of stress. But there was no direct evidence tying Kenneth to the murder, no DNA, no fingerprints on the weapon, no contradictory eyewitnesses. Technically, he was an outsider, but in the world of criminal psychology, Kenneth fit the profile of someone who knew something, but was too afraid to speak. Years later, in an interview, Kenneth said quietly, "I didn't kill Martha, but I think I walked into a world I didn't belong to, and it swallowed me whole." That statement raised a haunting question. Did Kenneth know who the killer was? Or was he a pawn, used to throw off the investigation? Not long after his initial interrogation, Kenneth lost his job, fell into a deep depression, and left Connecticut. Records show he was later hospitalized for anxiety disorders, and he never returned to Belle Haven. Though he was never charged, the image of the nervous tutor lingered in the public memory, casting shadows over the case for decades. Around the same time, another odd detail emerged and was quietly ignored. A neighbor, walking past the Skakel property's small golf area on the morning of October 31st, noticed a faint drag mark in the grass, about 15 feet long, stretching from the back fence to the tree where Martha was found. But when police returned later, the lawn had already been mowed. No photos, no official documentation, just a memory, and the sinking feeling that something crucial had been erased. For years after Martha's death, Michael Skakel, the 15-year-old younger brother, remained on the sidelines of the investigation. His initial statements were vague, but not directly contradicted by witnesses or physical evidence, and no one outside his mother or attorney was ever allowed to question him alone. But nearly 2 decades later, his name would resurface, this time from the mouths of people who had once lived with him. In the early 1990s, an investigative journalist received a tip from 2 former students at Ellen's school, a controversial boarding school for troubled teens in Maine. According to their account, Michael had been sent there following the murder due to behavioral issues and alcohol abuse. What stood out, though, was a chilling confession they claimed Michael made during a group punishment ritual, a psychologically aggressive form of confrontation the school was known for. One witness recalled, Michael was in the center of the circle and they forced him to scream the truth. He said, "I did it, but they can't touch me. I'm a skakel." Even though others denied hearing that line, the rumor spread, enough to reignite public interest. Enough for people to ask, where was Michael Skakel on the night of October 30th, 1975? In 1997, the case was reopened, and for the first time, Michael was called to testify. That's when investigators learned something disturbing. Michael's story had changed, not once, but at least 3 times over the years. From, I was swinging a baseball bat, to, I was walking around, to, I climbed a tree near Martha's house to watch her. None of those stories matched. And more importantly, no one could verify his whereabouts after 9:30 p.m., not a single person. In a leaked audio recording from a memory recall therapy session at a lawn, Michael's voice is heard saying, I wanted to see her. I climbed the tree. I had urges. I don't remember anything after that. It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't a denial either. And so, nearly 30 years later, suspicion began to circle back to Michael Skakel, not just because of what he said, but because of how he kept hiding from the truth, and how his story changed every single time it was told. In the year 2000, 25 years after Martha's murder, Michael Skakel was officially charged with first-degree murder. The news exploded across headlines, igniting a media firestorm. Michael, now 39, was no longer the shy, wealthy teenager he once was. He was a divorced man with a history of rehab, carrying the weight of a past that had never truly come to light. The press dubbed it the trial of the decade, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but because of the Skakel name and its connection to the Kennedys. The Kennedy family, a symbol of American politics, was back in the spotlight. But this time, it wasn't about elections. It was about one question. Can justice really exist when the accused is related to power? Even without strong physical evidence, the prosecution had a powerful weapon. Michael's shifting stories, vague confessions made over the years, inconsistencies he could never fully explain. Witnesses who were once overlooked were now brought to court. A few former Ellen students, who had stayed silent for years out of fear, now stepped forward. One of them said, Michael used to brag, "They can't touch me. We've got better lawyers than this whole courtroom." There was no DNA, no fingerprints. But what the court had was a web of broken statements, contradictions, and logic full of holes. In 2002, after a trial that lasted nearly a month, Michael Skakel was found guilty, sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Dorthy Moxley wept, not from joy, but because someone was finally being held accountable. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, because what came next would shock the entire country. After the 2002 conviction, many believed the case was finally closed. The Skakel family fell silent. And Dorthy, the mother who had fought for nearly 3 decades, began learning to live in a world without her daughter, but with a sliver of justice. Then in 2013, 11 years into his sentence, Michael Skakel's conviction was overturned. The reason? The Connecticut Supreme Court ruled that his original defense attorney had been grossly ineffective. Specifically, attorney Mickey Sherman had failed to investigate key alibi witnesses, neglected to call crucial testimony, and overlooked evidence that might have cleared Michael. Most notably, a childhood friend of Michael's came forward, claiming they were together during the exact window when the murder occurred. If that was true, the prosecution's entire timeline fell apart. The court agreed to reconsider, and in a stunning turn, Michael's conviction was vacated. After 11 years in prison, he was granted temporary release. America was stunned. The Moxley family was devastated. For the second time in her life, Dorthy Moxley had to watch the man accused of murdering her daughter walk out of court, head held high. And this time, not because he was found innocent, but because a lawyer had made mistakes. Soon after, the state's attorney's office announced it would not retry the case. They claimed there was no longer sufficient legal foundation to proceed with a new trial based on the existing evidence. In a single moment, everything unraveled. The conviction erased. Michael returned to his life. And the case went right back to where it started. In 2020, Michael Skakel was officially cleared of all charges. Not because he was proven innocent, but because the system didn't hold. Nearly 50 years after that fateful October night, justice for Martha remains heartbreakingly out of reach. And for those who followed this case, there's still one question that's never been answered. If it wasn't Michael, then who was it? After Michael Skakel's conviction was overturned and he walked free, the American public fell into what the media called the Martha Moxley crisis of faith. A case once thought to be solved had never felt more uncertain. What was real? What was speculation? Would justice ever be served? Or had this all been a game of power dragged out for nearly half a century? Theories once treated as fact were now under the microscope. Theory 1. Michael was the killer, supported by vague confessions, odd behavior, and constantly shifting alibis, but lacking hard physical evidence. The conviction had relied heavily on statements from people who'd lived in extreme psychological conditions, like those at Elan School. After his release, independent forensic experts concluded there was no evidence placing Michael at the crime scene at all. Theory 2. Thomas Skakel was the killer. He was the last person known to be with Martha. His alibi came from the family's housekeeper, though her timeline didn't quite line up. Investigators once saw Thomas as a prime suspect, so why was he never charged? Theory 3. Kenneth Littleton, the tutor. He showed signs of anxiety, spiraled into mental health issues after the murder, and was inside the Skakel home that night. But again, no evidence, just psychological speculation. And then came Theory 4, the strangest yet the hardest to completely dismiss. A stranger, an unknown intruder somehow entered this gated, high-security neighborhood, committed the murder, and disappeared without a trace. Highly unlikely. But no one could prove who did do it, so no one could rule this out either. In interviews after his release, Michael Skakel said, "I'm not that kid from Belle Haven anymore. I'm not a murderer, but I understand why people think I am. I've even doubted myself." Strangely, that statement unsettled people more than it brought relief. Because if even he didn't know what to believe, how could anyone else? Something happens when a case stretches on for too long. People stop chasing the truth. They start chasing the feeling of what seems believable. And in the case of Martha Moxley, even that feeling began to fracture. To this day, the case remains open. There is no definitive killer, no final verdict, only scattered puzzle pieces, some fitting, some not, and no clear place to put trust. In 2016, former O.J. Simpson investigator Mark Fuhrman published a book called Murder in Greenwich. In it, he firmly concluded that Michael Skakel was the killer. The book became a bestseller, sparked national debate, but added nothing to the legal case. Because in court, books aren't evidence. Meanwhile, independent civilian investigators began offering entirely new theories. One claimed that both Skakel brothers were present, that the murder happened in a moment of impulsive rage, not a planned act. Then, the adults covered it up, erased evidence, and buried the truth with high-powered lawyers. An even darker theory suggested the case wasn't mishandled by accident, but deliberately to protect the Kennedy name. That lost files, skipped searches, and unused surveillance weren't oversights, but decisions. And still, all of it remains speculation. While investigators argued, journalists wrote books, and podcasts spun countless theories. One person continued to live in a reality no one could erase. Dorthy Moxley, the mother. In 2020, when Michael Skakel's charges were officially dropped, she gave the press just one quiet sentence. "I don't need a courtroom anymore. I just need someone to tell me what happened." No longer hoping for an arrest. No longer chasing evidence. Just the most human need of all. To know the truth, even if it comes late, even if it hurts. And that's the question still echoing in the hearts of millions who followed this case. Who killed Martha Moxley? And why don't we know? Even now, silence lingers beneath the old elm tree. No one talks about Martha anymore. No one fears being questioned. And life moves on, as if a child was never murdered in her own backyard. But for Dorthy Moxley, time has never been a healer. It's only the widening space between her daughter's laughter and the quiet wind she hears each morning as she steps into the yard. She still lives in the same house, still walks past the tree where her daughter was found, now twice its size, its bark split like a scar carved deep into memory. Every autumn, she places a single purple flower at its base. No one asks, no one stops her. Martha Moxley has no statue, no national memorial. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a public figure. She was just a 15-year-old girl, blonde, artistic, who wrote in purple ink and once dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. She wasn't killed for money. She wasn't killed out of hatred. Her death didn't begin with some grand conspiracy. It may have been just a moment of rage, a flash of jealousy, or a secret someone swore would never come to light. We don't know for sure, and maybe we never will. But one thing is certain. Justice isn't just a verdict. Justice is truth spoken aloud. It's when the lost are remembered, not as a case file, but as a human being. And sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from memory. The memory of a community, of a mother who never let go, of strangers like you, sitting quietly, listening to this story. Martha didn't vanish. Martha was forgotten. And it's our duty to make sure that never happens again.